Welcome to the first episode here of the Driven Leadership Podcast. If you guys only knew the trouble that we went to actually start today's episode, you know we're in for a good time. I just want to do some quick intros around the table real quick. In case you haven't listened to our trailer, I highly recommend you go check that out. It's pinned to whatever platform you're listening to this on. But today we're getting started with just doing a roundtable discussion of a pretty interesting topic. So before we get into that, I want to introduce our team. Our host of the Driven Leadership Podcast will be the team here at Driven. We are missing Mary, so we'll do a quick intro for her. I wanted to do it via a process that we normally do on the team where we introduce each other and kind of do a round robin here. Are you okay with that, Austin? I saw a little hesitation.
Yeah, you could have warned us.
I intentionally didn't warn you. Yeah, this is we're going off the cuff here. I'm the only one who knew we were gonna do this.
Yeah, I feel like that's a little one-sided.
Yeah.
But there we go.
So you don't have to read the notes, Tony. We're not prepared anyway.
Does anybody want to get us started, or you want me to kick it off here?
You kick it off.
All right. So I'm gonna introduce Eric, who is our the mermaid on the front of our ship at Driven Leadership.
The mermaid.
Yeah, the mainstay of Driven Leadership. He has been in leadership development since 2006. So before Austin was born, doing leadership development across the country with athletic teams at universities all over the place, in any sort of business you can imagine. Him and his wife, Mary, have led Driven Leadership since 2018. And then he's also this 2010. I knew I got that wrong. Yeah. 2010. And he's also the CEO of a day spa out in Southern California, Facial Lounge. And he's been doing that for a few years down there as well. So he's passionate about soccer, his grandkids, and his wife. And he loves medieval romance novels. Did I get that right, Eric?
No. Wow.
Sorry, high fantasy novels, I think is the correct
medieval
there.
Romance novels. Yeah. I guess you could take it there, but no.
So that's Eric McGrath, our CEO here at Driven. So Eric, who's going to intro?
I just keep picturing him as a mermaid on the front of a ship, and it's really bothering me. So
me too.
That visual is going to stick.
So my turn to introduce.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I'm gonna take Tony because Tony is not a mermaid on the front of a ship. That's quite the introduction. Thanks for that, Connor. So Tony, interesting enough, I think we've known each other probably about as long as Driven's been around. It was a little bit after Driven got started. And Mary and I went to it was a networking event function kind of thing. And they were giving out awards. And there's like thousands of people in this huge auditorium. And here's this bald English man up on stage receiving an award for having one of the best nonprofits in Orange County is basically what he was receiving it for. And he used soccer, which I played soccer in college, grew up playing soccer, super excited about it. And but he uses that to teach character development. And he was taking this whole program and putting it together. And I was just blown away right away. And I was kind of like, that's awesome. And so went up, met him, spent some time. He finagled me into being on his board. And at some point, he was kind of going, hey, I'm gonna step away from Pure Game, was the name of it. And I'm looking to continue to develop people. And I'm looking for a place to really challenge myself and push myself. And so we hooked it up. And so he came in and started running sales for us, and just this year, I mean, it was the beginning of this year, started getting going, doing all that, and it's been phenomenal. So do you want a personal? You want personal too. So Tony is the only man in his household. So he has incredible wife, Adrian, and two incredible kids, Cam and Logan, and he's going through the teenage years. And that's where all his hair. That's where all his hair went. That's where all mine went. No, and lives down in Southern California and is just kicking it down there. So there you go, Tony. All yours.
Very cool.
Thank you, Mr. McGrath. Yeah, all spot on. Well, I'm going to introduce Austin Haydel because he is a phenomenal man in the world of marketing. He's Mr. Creative and creates all sorts of wonderful, wonderful stuff for Driven Leadership. He's come up with some fantastic classes. I know because I'm sitting in on one. He's fantastic at that type of stuff. He has 5 kids. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, 5 kids. So I get him because I'm actually the 4th of 5 kids myself. So we connect on a very odd level because I was part of a 5-kid family. So I know what it's like to be the kid. So him being a dad of 5 must be awesome. He hates cats, apparently. There's something that not a lot of people know about Austin is he hates cats. And he loves to eat. Yeah, right. He loves to eat, but he loves meals. He loves meals.
Not cats. Yeah. He doesn't love to eat cats.
He doesn't like eating cats.
Separate facts.
Separate facts.
Cats, loves meals. Yeah. They're not at all related.
No, that's true. But he's doing a fantastic job at Driven, creating all of the marketing material and all of the content that we get to deliver and we get to use to serve our clients with.
Thanks, Tony. I get the privilege to introduce Connor Chafin to the group. Connor and I have been friends for the better part of a decade. He'll give you the exact day and time and week that we met because he'll never forget it because it was so impactful in his life. But I just say better part of a decade because it's been so long. Me and Connor worked together at the great old chicken joint that you may have heard of called Chick-fil-A, and got to watch. Well, he got to watch all my kids grow up and be born. I get to watch his kids grow and be born. We've traveled across country together. We've taken so many trips in U-Hauls together. And, that just forms a bond where wherever he goes, I tend to be there. And wherever he goes, I just tend to be there. I don't know if it's mutual or not, but he has 3 young children at home. His wife, Gracie. He is the man of his house.
What are you doing?
I don't know what happened there.
But I was going to say something specific, but it died. So he's the director of operations here at Driven Leadership, where anything when it comes to systems development, and overseeing how we do our business, he's in charge of. So really great to know him. So, yep, that's Connor in a nutshell.
Fantastic.
Well, literally nutshell.
And then, like I said, we're missing our chief relational officer, Mary, who will actually join us in the next podcast. So you'll hear more about her and her story, which is incredible, and the whole history of Driven in the next episode. So be sure to check that out as well.
That's a good one.
So want to jump in. Enough prelude. I want to get straight to the meat of today's episode because I think we're all gonna have quite a bit to say. I want to open up the table for discussion on what have you seen? What's your experience been with when you come into a business? Are you brought into a team with the focus of developing leaders, even developing the culture and systems and things like that, and you have to put leaders in place, or you see the leaders that are already in place? What are the unique qualifiers for leaders in a business or on a team?
So I want to kind of hop in the before that question, which to me immediately goes to I want to hit the one thing that I say don't do, like the big, because I see it all over the place. Everybody's doing it, and that is they hire somebody that was an expert in whatever the job is they're going to be managing, and they were good at it. You take a great salesperson and they hire them to lead and to manage a sales department.
Yeah.
They lose a great salesperson, and they didn't hire them based on leadership and management qualifications. They hired them based on they know the job and they know how to do it, and they assume that that's going to make them a great manager. And it just doesn't. It almost never does. I mean, Gallup's work is like 10% of people are natural great managers, and there's some key ingredients that go into it. And yet, seemingly so many people, they take the easiest, because they need this progression, this career advancement for people. They need all these things, which you do. But if we don't get, if we're just developing people because they know the job, then my experience, you got a high percentage chance of that failing. It just
and what you're describing is a pretty common scenario, right? Where you have somebody on the sales team, they've been on the team for 5 years, they apply for a management position, and on paper, that seems like a natural progression. So how do you get them to actually be successful in that? Or is there just a different methodology altogether that you're leading toward?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, at least in my experience, is we had to define what leadership meant. And so oftentimes we're looking for these different roles, and whether we call them a sales manager, or we call them a COO, a CFO, or whether it's high caliber leader, or we're talking about mid-level management, we have to identify what that looks like for the position and in the business. Proficiency doesn't equal leadership success. And so if I want them to be a leader and to lead and to be creative and empower people and develop their own team, they're not going to be successful in that role. However, I have seen and been a part of a lot of organizations where that wasn't the expectation of their mid-level management. Their mid-level management was just a high performer of sorts and a way of dangling another carrot for them to go after. And if that's what you're doing, can it be successful? Yeah. I really think it starts with, what are you actually trying to accomplish by bringing that person into the fold? And then what does the role actually mean for the business and the organization that you have?
When you're talking about having them in a leadership role, what you're really talking about is moving the title, right? To have the title behind, because we're all leaders in one way or another. We're influencing other people. So what are we looking for when we have those? And why I say it typically is not the person that just advances, unless, to your point, the leadership situation is we just need a role model, somebody that does the job well. Let's give them a kind of a lead role, an example role, something along those lines, versus a true management title or a director title or something along those lines. But if we're talking about somebody stepping into being a director of an organization, there's so many different skill sets that have almost nothing to do with the job. A sales director gets into forecasting and problem solving and managing the actual people and connecting to what drives and motivates them and understanding their goals and outcomes. And there's the whole skill set gets into how to work with people a whole lot more than it is how to close and follow the system or do the sales. So for me, to answer the question, number one, first, anybody in any type of management or director type role, is I'm looking at their emotional intelligence first. That's the very first one that is a must. If you have someone in a leadership role that has lower EQ, lower emotional intelligence or emotional quotient, then what you're going to get are more challenges when it comes to all of your people, solving problems, understanding the people and the landscape of those people. Like you're just going to have a whole lot of problems if they're needing to be good with people, because emotional intelligence is the good with people valve.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Tony, what do you? Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to just come at that from a slightly different angle because I worked and have worked with kids for so long. And to piggyback off of what Eric said there about the emotional intelligence, kids can be naturally brilliant at that stuff without ever knowing that they are, right? They don't necessarily need to be trained in that arena. They can just pick off people's emotions a whole lot easier than adults can for some reason. And when you actually watch kids in sport, there are natural leaders that come out of that. I coach my daughter's soccer teams, and there are just people who step in to lead the team. They're not asked to, they just step in, and they've got this natural personality about them that says, come follow me, right? And we're going to do it this way. And so it's the quality that's sitting underneath everything. And that's this somewhat to Eric's statement there about emotional intelligence. They're just a little bit more aware of people than others.
Yeah, no, I love that. So if we're talking practically, you have a manager listening to this and they're like, okay, cool, I need to make sure somebody has emotional intelligence. how do I measure that? Where do you, what's the guiding light, or how do you figure that out? Where do you find the people on your team who have that higher emotional intelligence?
As a light-hearted answer to that, put them on a soccer field and get them to play with kids.
Find out really quick, I think. Any sport with kids, anything with kids. Yeah.
I don't know if that would show my emotional intelligence or just massive amounts of competition, but it would be not great. It was actually interesting. I was reading a book recently, and it talked about this, that NASA had this exact issue, is when they grew their base from being short-term missions to long-term, year-long stints in a shuttle, that the ability to engage in an interview with a person and understand how they had emotional intelligence, what they found was simple things. The ability to laugh when someone is laughing, the ability to match mood and energy. And so I think a lot of times if you're a manager listening, it's like, okay, how do I measure EQ? Do you connect with the person? Are they connectable? Do they have a repetition or what's the word?
Reputation?
Yeah, there you go. Do they have a reputation for connecting consistently with people across the board? And if they do, then there's a high chance they have emotional intelligence, at least to some degree. And if they don't, you got a lot of work cut out for you, I guess.
You know, emotional intelligence. To your point, right? If you know what you're looking for, I think you can find it. And so, Connor, that's a terrible answer, because the reality is most people don't know what they're looking for. And so, was that Super Communicators with Duhigg? That story. I love that story, because what Duhigg's doing in there, and he talks about this guy's like, I'm gonna radically shift how we're interviewing NASA engineers. And he comes in and I forget what it was. It was like a yellow tie and a blue suit or something that was just awkward looking. And he comes walking into the interview, and he spills his books and his papers on the ground. And he's looking for how are they responding to this? Because these are very decorated, military, successful. Everyone comes in. If you looked at them on a resume, they're crushing it. In life, every aspect of their life is just dialed in. That's how they're getting potentially in this spot. And he's got to separate out, how are you going to perform after you've been cramped up in a cabin with somebody for a year? Who's going to pan out and not? And he does it by walking in like a dork and spilling his paper on the ground. And I thought it was brilliant, because he comes in, he does this, and he's like, so one, amazing human being, and forgive me, I don't remember the person's name that he was talking to, but amazing human being, but he sits there, he spills the stuff all over the paper, all over the ground, and the guy's like, basically staring at him. At least that's the way I took it, And he comes in and he's like, says something about his suit, and he's like, this was, I forget, but it was, Austin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was something like, my son gave this to me in some big important moment, and I'm finally wearing it, or something along those lines, right?
Yeah.
And the person's like, oh, okay. That's kind of the response. Yeah. And it was like, what? Where's the connect? I mean, whatever's going on, you're like, I got my stuff together. Eventually you'll get your stuff together and we'll start the interview. And he didn't even realize he'd already blown the interview in the first, because he didn't connect. Those are connection points. It's like, how do we do Me Too's, and somebody comes walking in a ridiculous looking suit and spills their stuff all over the ground. And the next person is like, can I help? Like, you doing all right? That's an interesting suit. He's like, yeah, my son, I'll get to wear. Oh, wow, that's an awesome story. Just somehow that connection, and then how that translates, you start getting emotional intelligence, because emotional intelligence has how do we connect with the outside world, and do we know how to manage and understand what's going on internally. And some people can be really good at understanding what's going on internally, but really poor at being able to identify what's happening externally and connecting those. So the short answer is, if you really want to know how somebody's good with emotional intelligence, and we have an assessment that does this, but get an assessment and have them take some type of initial assessment that highlights emotional intelligence. And even if you can do it from a leadership or management perspective, but if you don't have the assessment, look for the cues. Do they connect well? Do they, if you ask them stories like, tell me about a time. I mean, these are obvious, normal questions. Tell me about a time you ran into some adversity at work and what happened, what was going on with it, and what were you feeling as you were going through that? And by the depth of their answer, you're going to know what you're dealing with pretty darn quick. You'll get things like, well, it was their fault in this. I mean, you come down to that. There's no ownership. Two, and I've had people that in an interview, and they're just like, they start getting into what I really learned from that is that I'm not sure how to handle certain situations, blah, 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 and they start digging in personally, and they have an introspective depth to them. Mm-hmm. Well, that's typically the person that's more emotionally intelligent and aware because they're digging into the topics and looking for the deeper meaning.
Yeah, you jumped to my next question, which was like, if you have a team already and you're looking to promote internally, you look for those cues of emotional intelligence. But in an interview setting, I mean, that's a pretty simple way to just take a peek behind the curtain and be like, okay, what level of emotional intelligence do they have? That's a pretty basic question, pretty unassuming, but like you said, the depth to which they answer that is going to be pretty telling. And I love what we're saying.
Connor, just quickly, for the manager out there who's looking to interview for a leadership role and wants to know about this emotional intelligence, wear a blue suit with a yellow tie. Nice and simple.
Just copy it, yeah.
Probably
it works both ways. If they don't ask, you probably didn't get the job, and if they do ask, you just hope that it made sense enough to warrant it.
Yes, Smurfs are what get the jobs. Yes.
Well, so what I love too about going back to like internal promotion, looking at a team. If you start looking for emotional intelligence in your team and the people who qualify as high emotional intelligence, they more likely than not won't be the people who you may have expected to qualify as a leader, right? Because we've all been on those teams where you have the lower tier of team members, and there's those one or two people that connect with everybody. They know how to tell when somebody's having a bad day, even to the point of like they're covering other people's shifts because they're like, oh yeah, they just needed somebody, so I'm here for them. Like those are the people that whenever you put them in that leadership position, they're going to rise above the rest for their team. And that's really what you're looking for at a leader. I remember when I was at Chick-fil-A in New York, we had a guy, and I think I'm gonna share more of this story, more details of it, in an upcoming episode about my worst leadership moment. But we had a guy who worked in the kitchen, and he was so motivated to be a leader that I just kind of fast tracked him on that point. We were in need of leaders. We needed people that could manage a shift. And so if anybody had their hands up, it was an easy, like, all right, let's go. Let's put you through it. And what I didn't look through was what literally we're talking about here. There was not a lot of connection for the rest of the team. So when the shit hit the fan in the kitchen or on a bad shift, or if people didn't show up, he had no ability to rally the team in a way that we had with another leader who she didn't put her hand up for leadership, but I picked her because she had that connection with the team. And I didn't realize what I was doing at the time. I didn't say like, oh, you have a high EQ, you have a low EQ, and this is like, I was just going off natural instinct at that moment. But that for the long run, we're saying, yeah, emotional intelligence is the differentiator between those really impactful leaders.
Well, I don't want to make that everything. I'm just saying for me, that's a starting place. Right?
It's a big bucket. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the next thing?
I was going to say, I was actually going to kind of break in here and say, we got to be careful, though, because emotional intelligence isn't all that there is.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because if they don't have all the other components with emotional intelligence, then you have a really codependent leader that is just getting ramrodded. And if you have that person, that is just being everything for everyone and just supporting, and not getting anything done. And if you have that person, you've gotten one thing right. They just don't have the other components, which, and I guess I want to stop right here too, is to go, a lot of people want to look for emotional intelligence as something that is innate in someone or not innate in someone. And just for the manager out there who may not have the greatest amount of emotional intelligence, you can develop EQ. And for the business owner that is looking for leaders and looking around and going, I don't have anybody with EQ, start developing EQ. the more you can build a culture that is more emotionally intelligent. And we've done that in different organizations I've been a part of by creating different conversations and bringing things to life. It's hard. There's a trudge that goes on with it. However, you can develop it, and what comes out of that is a really beautiful thing. So just wanted to kind of put that caveat in there. Is like natural emotional intelligence doesn't have to be the only way.
You know, asterisk to that is that most people that would say, if someone's saying I am emotionally intelligent, usually that statement alone lends us into they are not. And it's like,
absolutely, yeah.
You know, it's like, I don't say I'm emotionally intelligent. I've been working on it a while, and I'm better at it than I used to be, but then I wind up in situation after situation going, oh man, I could have done that better. I could have been, you know? And so I'm just saying that out loud for the person that says, we got this nailed.
Yeah.
That is a flashing arrow saying, you need to look at this, okay?
Yeah.
Just
Turn around.
yeah. Look at
Yeah, so I think we've really nailed the first qualifier, emotional intelligence. Tick that box. What's some of the other ones that come to mind when we're talking about developing leaders or looking for leaders in our business?
I'm going to jump in there, and I believe wholeheartedly that something around people having a passion and a purpose for who they are and what they do, right? Mm-hmm. We've talked about this within our training, understanding your why. Why are you here on this planet? That passion and purpose that drives you every day. Because we all know that running a company, leading a team, it's hard work. You go through some big, deep troughs when you're running people. There are some deep valleys out there, and you've got to have that passion and purpose to be able to drive through that and know where you're heading. So I think that's a big one for me personally, to see people as a leader, a real sense of passion and purpose.
It's a good one. You know, I was thinking about, so Gallup's done so much work, more on managers, right, than the leadership side, which management gets into making sure everything runs correctly. The leadership side gets more into the behavioral piece of it. But if you're going to move somebody into a leadership role or management type role where they're managing other people to be successful, their number one is that they motivate their employees. And so they have the ability to, which I think a lot of people translate as like this extrinsic motivation, like they're running around and they're going, you can do it, you know, and that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about that you understand what drives them and really has them tap into what engages them, gets them performing, and you're working with that to help them not only accomplish the goals at work, but accomplish goals in their personal life. Their number two is that there's someone who asserts themselves to overcome the challenges, the obstacles that are going on. I relate that to some level of grit, because if I mean, we all know on this group, if you get put in a management role, you're in for a fight. And that doesn't mean you're fighting your people. That means there's a learning curve. You got to learn your people. There's going to be all these things that are thrown at you, and how you deal with it. Do you have the grit? Do you have the fight to handle? Do you like problem solving? You know, do you like dealing with that stuff?
Yeah.
The other side of it is they've got to be able to, their number three for Gallup is they got to be able to create a culture of accountability. So, you know, you need the emotional intelligence to have empathy and to care and to mediate and to do all sorts of things. You also have to have emotional intelligence to create accountability, where when you're showing care and you're caring about the people around you, you're doing it by high standards and high performance. It's not just a kumbaya session where we're all sitting together. It's like, okay, we're going after it. We're going to crush it. And the fourth one is building trusting relationships. So it's like, do you have the ability to really build trust, create psychological safety within meetings and an environment where people are heard, people are listened to, and on top of that, they want to run hard instead of you're making them run hard. And the last one, they get into not being biased. So it's being able to make informed decisions without taking bias. And especially when somebody's been promoted out of a peer group into a role, it gets really hard because you had your friends before, and then it's automatically assumed that your peer group is going to be there after. I know I just threw all those out, but to me, it's always a good list when I'm looking at management and management leadership type role. Is that they have the skill and the ability to do most of those, and the others can be taught. I feel like they can get there on the others.
I've always gone through two big things that many people have probably heard. Hungry, humble, and smart. I believe that like Pat Lencioni's version of those three things. And then faithful, available, and teachable, right? I used to walk around saying, I want some fat people. Faithful, available, and teachable. Oh. And they would always go like, what? Yeah, okay. That makes more sense.
I just did the thing.
Yeah, you connected it in your head, right?
Yeah.
So, but as I look through that and even hear the list you're talking about, and even in our first bit of conversation, right? Like hungry, humble, smart, faithful, available, teachable. Humble, teachable. There's that level of emotional intelligence that they understand. They're self-aware enough to work through it. And so I think one thing that I was just noticing as I was writing this stuff down, they assert themselves, they can motivate employees, they're smart, right? But there's a desire. And so I would say for me that the number one thing after emotional intelligence is they actually want to do this. I think often, and for what reason, to kind of match with Tony's point there is, like their purpose in doing it matches that they actually want to do it for the right reasons. And it's not just for the increased dollar amount. Not saying that is not a good motivator, because money is there and people are motivated by money, and that's a good thing. I'm not saying it has to be fluffy, frilly. I want to change the world one human at a time. They can be motivated by money, but what's right past that? There's this hunger to become better. There's this faithfulness aspect on the fat version, and even when you're looking at Gallup's 5, that's centralized in this idea that they desire leadership and they want to lead at a high level.
So we got a lot there, a lot thrown out, and we've been mostly talking about like internal promotion. I feel like that's kind of the mindset that we're all in. But as we know, there's a lot of business owners out there who they've been running their company for X amount of years, and they are at the stage where they have to bring in other managers or leaders. They're trying to grow their team. What's some advice to business owners who are like, how do they know where to look? Where do you go to find the right people? What are some mistakes to avoid maybe when bringing on leaders for your, fledgling business, for lack of a better word?
So you're asking.
I don't like fledgling, but so your startup business.
I want to make sure I understand the question. So you're saying a business owner, whether it's a business that's struggling or whether it's a big thriving business or whatever, but we've got to bring in managers, and you're saying from the outside, how do we do that?
Yeah,
is that what the question
hires.
is?
Yeah, external.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I keep jumping in first, so I'll yield to these.
That's all right. You're the mermaid on the front. So
I'm the mermaid. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Your tail is wobbling, baby.
Let's focus on the tail, not the mermaid
they
part.
don't have mermaids. They don't have mermaids on the front of ships. You know that. Just putting out.
Yeah. See,
there.
he was a
a
Navy officer. He was part of the Royal Navy.
Yeah. They don't have.
I've seen it
They
in
have
movies, so I know it's real.
It's a figurehead.
Have you never seen Moana? There's definitely a mermaid on the front of that ship.
Well, so back on track. So if you're bringing in leaders from outside, to me, culture is what. It's so funny because every time I talk about, I'll go into companies, I'll talk about this, and it seems obvious to me, and yet at the same time, I'd say it's the most counterintuitive thing that what people actually do. Because what they're doing is they're looking at, I need to fill this role. So they start looking at experience first. They look at, have they done something like this or similar, which is valuable for sure. I'm not saying it's not. Yet if we're really talking about management, not doing a job that an implementer would do in the company, it's not, we work with a lot of heating and air companies. And I'm like, I don't need an installer who used to manage people. I need a manager of people, and I can teach them enough about the installing part in most cases to be able to manage these people that are doing it. It's helpful to have the bridge, but it's not mandatory. What's mandatory, are you really good with people, and do you fit into this company? To me, those are the two most important things. So it's looking at the culture. What does culture mean? So it's like, what is our culture in our business? How do you define the culture of the business? What are the core values? Do they show? Gets into some harder things to measure, though. You know, when you're interviewing, you're talking to people. How do you know if they fit your culture or not? You got to know what your cultural pillars are.
Yeah.
Talking about culture, there's a leadership identity within every culture. What do your leaders consistently do? How are they going to fit in with that? And then there's just the overall general leadership competencies. Can they motivate people? Do they have emotional intelligence? And I would almost break it into two separate camps. At least in my head, I love to break things apart in order to qualify them. And so first interview, I would say, okay, do they have the leadership qualities in general? Can they actually lead in any form or facet? Do they have the experience to lead? But then it's going to get way deeper than that and go, okay, can they exhibit the behaviors of a leader that I want? And that's the identity of our business, which is totally different than just general leadership principles.
I mean, are you talking about culture there, or is that like an own separate set of beliefs for leadership?
I think so. There's businesses I've worked with or read books on or been a part of as far as organizations, and the ones that have a leadership identity, there's a set of cultural normatives. Some of them are core values, some are outside of core values. It depends on how you use core values, and that's why like everyone does all this so differently. But in my mind, in the organization that we had a set of cultural imperatives that were just for leaders. Leaders asked questions first. We sought how to work together, not apart. There were specific things that we did. And so as the leadership team, and that wasn't necessarily our core values as a company, because
For the rest of the team.
we're
like the team member level.
yeah, those aren't for the rest of the team, but this is just for us. And so I would say, what are those things for you? And identifying those kind of gives you that outline or that skeleton of a human, at least walking into the interview, so you can start identifying those things to say, okay, are they breathing life into this? Can they be that person or not?
And I think on that point there, I read this in a book about special forces. It was the special forces, the SAS, and the development of the SAS. And they talked about 9/10 of leadership being, you can teach 9/10 of leadership. So as Austin's there, people can come in and we can teach that on a PowerPoint or in a book, and you can read about it. But the final 10th can't be taught. The final 10th is something inside of you, and this is your cultural imperatives, your values, the way that you show up. That final 10th is the thing that you should be asking questions about. Can you uncover what it is that drives them? Can you uncover who would follow them? Can you uncover that part that's inside?
Yeah, that reminds me of that stat, Eric, that you share, I think, in the Foundations for Leadership class. What is it with what percentage of the population is actually able to lead?
That's Gallup's work too, but
Yeah.
they say natural. It's kind of the opposite of what Tony said, but in a way, I mean, I get it. I get where he's coming from. Is that so? Gallup's work says that natural managers is what they're talking about.
Yeah.
10% of the population. Literally 1 in 10 people can just walk in and they're really good at it.
Yeah.
And then they feel they can develop it up to about total, including that 10%, up to about 40% they can train. And the other 60% ties into what Tony's talking about, that magical chemistry piece, that little extra bit. They're saying that's only in 40% of people. You can only bring it out in people. The other 60% will never get there. And, I don't know where they get those numbers. I don't know if those ratios are exactly right. But what I do know is there is definitely a group that just has it. There is a group that can be taught it. They're kind of on the verge. They're interested. As Tony was saying, they got this purpose, this drive to kind of head in that direction. And then there's this group, and I want to use Mary for this, for those that know Mary out there. Mary's the best people person I've ever met. Like, she loves people. She cares. I mean, she's all these amazing. She's emotionally aware and intelligent. She is the worst manager you ever met in your life. And she'd be the first to say it. I mean, she's like, I don't want to manage people. She's like, just let me go do. Let me run.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, So they got to want it. They got to really, you can take all those skills and where do you want to direct them? And to Tony's point, you got to have that kind of secret sauce piece in there, which to me is this composite of all this, the charisma, the excitement, the belief that I want to work it through people versus I want to get it done myself.
Yeah. It's always funny when I hear that stat, because when I put myself as a manager or a business owner, that statistic would terrify me because then I would turn around and look at my team and be like, I wonder what percentage. I've only got 3 leaders. What are the odds they fall into that magical 10%?
Yeah.
Or that 40%?
Well, so if you're not looking for it.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things too with this is that, and maybe this is in the last 10 years, 15 years, I've noticed this, is this hyper focusing on, or let me back up. There's 1 or 2 camps that normally people fall into, and they are like, we're going to develop leaders, we're going to get leaders, we're going to have a leadership development culture, this training culture, we're going to have leaders, and they're just going to be coming out of our yin-yangs, or the opposite, which is like, we're going to only hire external, yep, you're welcome, yin-yangs, external. You only have these external kind of, we're hiring from the outside, we're not internally building them, XYZ. But more than not, we see this other side, I think just with social media, with books, and with authors and influence. It's like leadership culture has become a lot more popular. And what I've noticed is, though, a decrease in value of just the really good contributors. I even noticed that in our organization as we were developing leadership progression plans, and we had all of this focus on developing the next generation of leaders and next generation of talent and constantly succession planning. We, for about 5 years, just completely overlooked massively important people on our team that don't have that 10% naturally or don't fall into that 40% giftedly, but they have massive amount of value. Just not in leadership. And so one of the things I would challenge anybody to do is go, how do you utilize those people more? Yeah, they can't be a leader, right? Or they're not going to be a leader, or it's such a long road to become a leader, but you can utilize them more than where they are. Right. You can challenge them and give them stretch assignments, and you can cultivate that in them to be even better. They just may not be a leader, and that's okay too. And there's massive value in that. Some of my favorite stories of our organization are actually of those people, within the business. So
there's 2 different things going on here. There's management, and then there's leadership. And I think we're crossing these conversations because I think there are leaders who have no responsibility for people underneath them. They are just great human beings, great people who are amazing leaders in the world. They're not managing one soul. And then you've got managers who are managing 10, 15, 20 people who are terrible at it. And so there are definitely 2 different people we're talking about here as well.
Yeah. Well, and that is exactly why I wanted to kind of start and kickstart this podcast with this conversation, because I think we're all right now wrestling with the massive tectonic plates between leadership and management, and we have a bunch of topics lined up that explore that concept to the very depths of the Earth's crust.
The
if
depths.
we want to keep that metaphor going.
the depths and the breath.
And before we wrap things up here, I want to do this, kind of on every episode, since we have all 4 of us. Any final thoughts, as you prepared for this, that we didn't, maybe a question didn't trigger a thought you had before? Any final thoughts before we wrap things up here?
I'd like to jump in with one final thought. Curiosity. We haven't talked about curiosity, and I think good leaders are curious. I think Austin touched on it, but I think they've got to have a level of curiosity that makes them want to understand people, the company, the culture, learning everything about that.
Yeah, I would only add to one thing, which is put down what you think the outcome should be in the person that you want. Any preconceived notion of that when you're going into an interview, when you're going into identifying the role, though it's hard, right? Like I'm saying that I'm going like results matter, outcomes matter, those things matter.
Yeah.
But in leadership, the person is so much more important. And if you get the person right, the outcomes will happen. But the vice versa is not true. If they have the outcomes in mind, it doesn't always translate to the person being right. And the outcome of that is detrimental for your culture. So focus on the person. I think Chick-fil-A used to say it like this: character over competency, but competency matters.
Yeah.
So,
Well said.
Yeah.
You know, my thought was we didn't put any time into this, and maybe this is a future one, but it's once you get them, a really good manager, a really good leader of people, they're usually actually a little more work in an organization.
yeah.
And so what I mean by that is people go, well, I'm going to hire this right person, bring him in, and then it's all going to take care of itself. And it's actually, if they're really a great leader, they're going to come in, they're going to see things, they're going to challenge, they're going to go, hey, let's go right instead of going left. And you got to have a good relationship and connection with you. You got to be a good leader in the trenches with them. It's not like they're a good leader and then you get to regress. And so I see that often. It's like people, they find the right person, but then they don't do the work. And then that right person is only there 6 months or a year because that right person is like, I want to go be with other leaders. I don't want to be the only one in this company. So it's just,
what do they say? A right thing in the wrong time is a wrong thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I haven't heard
right.
that one,
So you could be the right person, and if you're not cultivating them because it's too busy or it's not the right time or the systems aren't built or whatever those things, it's like, well, that's not the person's fault. That's the organization's fault.
Right.
And so that should definitely be another episode for sure.
I bring that up because we have so many people that go through like our Bold Advanced Leadership course, and they go through that, and the lights come on, right? They get hyper engaged. They come back. They're challenging, but in a good way. They're looking to move everything forward. There's all these cool things that come out of it. One of the things we have to do when we engage with a company is we interview the leadership, because we're like, okay, are you building a culture in a company where when somebody comes back like this, it's going to make it better instead of they're going to come back and get frustrated and check out and go. So it's like, that's why you start at the top of the company. You want to have great leaders? Be a great leader.
That's good. All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it there. To our listeners, I hope you can tell that we are itching to dig deeper into these conversations. We've pre-recorded a few episodes, and this is the shortest one by far. So we are so ready to dive into leadership with you, and we want to hear from you. Email info@drivenleadership.com if you have any questions or topics that you want to hear us dive into. We want to hear what's going on in your business, in your life, in your personal development, because we want to chat about it as well. It's probably something that we got a lot of thoughts on. So thank you guys for joining me today. This is going to be a blast, I know. So yeah, we'll see you in the next episode, everybody.